Chapter 1. In the Lower Regions. I felt like I had lost all notion of time. The idea of space had left me long ago. I was sure that I no longer belonged to the incarnate ranks of the world, but my lungs continued to take deep breaths. How long had I been the puppet of irresistible forces? It was impossible to tell. Actually, I felt like a prisoner trapped behind dark bars of horror. With my hair on end, my heart pounding, and scared stiff, I often cried out like a madman. I begged for mercy and clamored against the painful despondency that had taken hold of my spirit. But when my loud cries didn't fall on an implacable silence, they were answered by lamenting voices even more pitiful than my own. At other times, sinister laughter rent the prevailing silence. I thought that some unknown companion out there was a prisoner of insanity. Diabolical forms, ghastly faces, animal-like countenances appeared from time to time, increasing my panic. When it wasn't pitch dark, the landscape seemed to be bathed in a lurid light, as if shrouded in a thick mist that was warmed from afar by the rays of the sun. The strange journey continued. To what end? Who could say? I only knew that I had to keep moving. Fear drove me blindly onward. Where were my home, my wife, and children? I had lost all sense of direction. The fear of the unknown and my dread of the darkness paralyzed all my powers of reasoning as soon as I had broken free from my last physical ties in the grave. My conscience tormented me. I would have such preferred a total absence of reason or non-existence. From the beginning, tears had run constantly down my face, and I only rarely enjoyed the blessing of sleep. However, any feeling of rest was suddenly interrupted. Monstrous, sneering creatures would awaken me. I had to get away from them. I realized I was in a different sphere, one that arose from the dust of the earth, but it was too late. Anguished thoughts weighed heavily on my mind, and when I would try to make some sense of it all, a string of incidents would drive my thoughts into confusion. Never before had the religious problem seemed so profound to me. The principles that had been purely philosophical, political, and scientific now seemed completely secondary for human life. In my present view, they did represent a valuable heritage on the earth. However, I had come to realize that humankind was not comprised of transitory lifetimes, but of eternal spirits on their way to a glorious destination. I could see that something stands above every merely intellectual thought. That something is faith, a divine manifestation to human beings. Such an analysis came too late, however. Indeed, I had known the words of the Old Testament and had often leafed through the Gospels, but I was forced to realize that I had never searched the sacred writings with the light of my heart. I had identified with them through the critique of writers who were either not inclined to sentiment and conscience, or who were in outright disagreement with the essential truths. On other occasions, I had followed the interpretation of priests, never leaving the circle of contradictions into which I had willingly entered. Actually, from my own point of view, I had not been a criminal, but the philosophy of living for the immediate present had absorbed me fully. My earthly existence, which had been transformed by death, had been no different than the average standard. Born of perhaps excessively generous parents, I had earned my academic degrees without much sacrifice and had shared in the vices of the youth of my time. I had set up a home and had had children. I had searched for a stability that would guarantee my family's economic tranquility. But on self-examination, something in the silent pangs of my conscience made me feel like I had wasted my time. I had lived on the earth, enjoyed its benefits, and reaped the blessings of life, but I had never contributed anything towards repaying my enormous debt. I had had parents whose generosity and sacrifices I never appreciated, and a wife and children whom I fiercely imprisoned in the unyielding web of destructive selfishness. I had had a home whose doors I closed to all who walked the desert of anguish. Deaf to the most elementary duties of fraternity, I had delighted in the joys of my own family circle, but had forgotten to share such a divine blessing with the immense human family. In the end, like a flower in a greenhouse, I couldn't stand the atmosphere of the eternal realities. I hadn't nurtured the divine seeds that the Lord of life had sown in my soul. I had wrongfully suffocated them in my insatiable desire for my own welfare. I hadn't trained my organs for a new life. It was only right, then, that I should awaken here like a cripple, who, thrown into the infinite river of eternity, was unable to swim in the unstoppable current of water, or like a miserable beggar who, exhausted in the middle of nowhere, wanders about at the mercy of a furious storm. Oh, dear friends on earth, how many of you could avoid the bitter path of sorrow by cultivating the inner fields of your hearts? Light your lamps before crossing the great darkness. Seek the truth before the truth finds you unprepared. Sweat and work now, lest you weep later.